Hello, everyone. In this session, I'm going to discuss these two important topics: unemployment and inflation. And these two, terms are used to measure the performance of any country or economy. We have seen that the China's population is start decreasing, and we want to know how China's comparative advantage of low labor cost may be eroded with the shrinking population in the next 10 years. So, because this, we know that because of this high population, we have cheap labor from China. But what would happen after 10 years down the road if China's labor force is becoming more expensive? In 1980, China had one child policy. In 2016, China had two child policy. And after 2021, China now has three child policy. So they are relaxing this restriction in order to increase the population. So this is the website. You can go and just check China's population pyramid as well as for other countries. So I just want you to just go to visit this website and just compare the population growth rates and population pyramid for China and India, and see what you can see if you can, just check if you can the growth patterns of these two countries, that is China and India. So let's discuss, in order to discuss unemployment. So first we discuss unemployment, and then in the second part of this session, in the same session, we will discuss inflation. So first I'm going to show you labor force characteristics. And this data is for 15 years and over and both sexes. But you can definitely have data for other age groups and for males and females separately as well. So I am giving you data for June 2022. But this is your actually homework. You don't have to submit, but make sure you know data for August 2023 as well. But I've already given you the population. Currently, population is 40 million. So we hit the 40 million mark. And then we have working age population. So in the bracket, you have to write the number for August 2023. Okay. And where you get this information, go to Statistics Canada website and just find this information. And you have to complete this table. So working age population. So I'm just discussing the data for June 2022. Working age population is 31.74 million. Population is 38.7 million in June 2020. That is basically last year. Labor force was last year was 20.5 million people. Employment, full-time employment, part-time employment, unemployment, and not in labor force. So not in labor force data is not given, but you calculate, and show you how we have actually calculated not in labor force. That is people who are in this category, not in labor force. So basically, working age population has two components. So working age population consists of labor force and not in labor force. These are the only two categories. So if you are in the working age population group, then either you are in the labor force or you are not in the labor force. If I know the labor force, that is 20.6 million, and if I know the working age population 31.74 million, then I know that 11.14 million are not in labor force. So not in labor force is basically working age population minus labor force. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do, let's discuss what do we mean, what is working age population, what do we mean by this, what do we mean by labor force, employment, full-time, unemployment, and everything. So we define all these terms in the next few two slides, I believe. Let's say. So these are all definitions. Number one, population is the total population. So let me go back here and just show you. So this is the total population of the country. This is population of the whole country, right? And now we have working age population. So what is working age population? So working age population, in short, I will write WAP, does not include population under 15 years of age. So if you're under 15 years of age, you will not be included in working age population. Full-time in mental or penal institutions, hospitals, or the armed forces as well. So if you're in the armed forces, you will not be included in working age population. So when we subtract all population under 15 years of age, and those who are in these institutions are not included. Then we have labor force, and I told you that working age population, if you are in this category, then that is if you are 15 years and above, and you are not in the mental and penal institutions, you are not in the hospitals, or you are not in the labor force, then there are only two possibilities. Either you are in the labor force or you are not in the labor force. If you are in the labor force, what do we mean by this? So if you're in the labor force, members of the working age population who are either employed or unemployed. So if you're in the labor force category, you have only two possibilities. Either you are working or you are looking for a work. That are the two possibilities if you are in the labor force category. If you are not in the labor force category, it means that you are those members, this category has members that who are, neither employed nor unemployed. So not in labor force means you are not working and also you are not looking for a job as well. That is the definition of not in labor force. For example, full-time students, if they are not working. So if they are not working, they are not looking for a job, they are just studying full time. And similarly, housewives. So they are not looking for employment and they are not employed. So this category is what we call not in labor force category. So I told you that if you are in the labor force, you are either working or looking for a job. If you are working, then you have, by working, I mean that you, of course, are in the labor force and are involved in paid employment. So you are earning income. And unemployed simply means, I'm not saying unemployment rate, number of person unemployed. Unemployed, those who are looking for employment. Those who are looking for employment. If someone is not looking for employment, I don't call that person as unemployed. Unemployed means you are looking for a job. Okay. Now, once you know all this, then we have three measures, and that is very important. So when we compare countries, sometimes we compare based on these rates as well. Number one, participation rate. The formula to calculate participation rate is labor force, LF, divided by working age populations times 100. This is the formula. That is what percentage of your working age population is in labor force. That is called participation rate. So suppose your working age population is 100 people, and out of 100 people, 50 people are either employed or looking for work. That is labor force. So 50 divided by 100 times 100 is 50%. It means 50% is your participation rate. Participation rate means that what is the percentage of your working age population who are either employed or looking for a work. or basically part of labor force. What percentage of your working age population is a part of labor force? So for June 2022, that I showed you data earlier on the second slide, I can calculate. So 20.6 million people were in the labor force, and 31.74 million were the working age population, times 100, so 64.9%. That is 64.9% of working age population are in labor force. Then we can calculate unemployment rate that you must have, read in the newspaper, in the news, and also on other websites. That unemployment in Canada is 5%, or unemployment in African countries or in South Asia, a very high, close to 15 to 20%. All this data. So how do we calculate unemployment? Members of the labor force who do not hold paid employment. So unemployment rate, the formula is unemployment, that is number of persons who are unemployed, divided by labor force. Don't divide by working age population. So we calculate unemployment rate as those who are unemployed out of the total labor force. So I have the data for June 2022. So 1 million are unemployed. It's not given here. I think I should, in the actual slide, no, here it is. Unemployment is 1 million. Yeah. So 1 million unemployment divided by labor force, that is 20.6 million. So if you divide 1 million divided by 20.6 million times 100, you get 4.9%. So 4.9% is unemployment rate. All the definitions are already given here. That is labor force, members of the working age population who are either employed or unemployed. Not in labor force are those members of the working age population who are neither employed nor unemployed. For example, full-time students. Employed, those in the labor force and paid employment. So they are, involved in paid employment. They're earning. Okay. Now we calculate employment rate. Remember, employment rate is not the opposite of unemployment rate. So don't think that if unemployment rate is 4.9%, it means 95.1% is employment. This is incorrect. So unemployment rate, if it is 4.9%, it does not mean that you just subtract from 100% and get the value for employment rate. Why? Because we have a different formula to calculate employment rate. So the formula to calculate employment rate is E. E means number of persons employed in the labor force divided by not labor force, but working age population. So that is the difference. Don't get confused. So when we calculate employment rate, we see how many people are employed, both part-time and full-time, both, and then divide by working age population instead of labor force. So if I take you to this slide, so you have employment 19.6 million people. Remember, I have added both full-time employment and part-time employment. So Statistics Canada actually considers both full-time and part-time employment as employed workers. So if you add these two, full-time and part-time, that is 16.0 to 3.6 million, you get 19.6. This is total employed workers divided by not labor force, but working age population. That is 31.7 more million people. So if you do this, you calculate this number as 61.81% employment rate in June 2022. So you have to calculate all these numbers for August 2023. When you update that table, then you should be able to calculate participation rate, unemployment rate, and employment rate. Now let's talk about a little bit more about unemployment. So we now discuss different types of unemployment, and here there are four types of unemployment given. Number one, frictional unemployment. And frictional unemployment is caused by the time it takes for people to find their first job or to move between jobs. Prolonging the job search will increase the frictional unemployment. So, by frictional unemployment, I simply mean if you are moving from one job to another job, it is not possible that you move instantaneously, right, without wasting any time. So, for example, if you resign from your current job in January 2023 and then join in February 2023. So for this 1 month, you become unemployed. This unemployment is called frictional unemployment, and government cannot do anything. In every country, you have frictional unemployment because people are moving from one job to another job. And of course, the time it takes from moving from one job to another job is basically your frictional unemployment. Normally, frictional unemployment is a short term unemployment. You cannot say that I just resigned this job and I will join the new job after 5 years. That is not possible, uh, you know, logically. So you can't say that I am unemployed for the last, for 5 years. So I've been not working as a I'm frictionally unemployed, been unemployed. I have been frictionally unemployed for the last 5 years. That is not logical. So frictional unemployment is basically a short-term unemployment. That is when you are moving from one job to another, or even after graduation, suppose you are looking for a job. It takes some time, right? So right after receiving your diploma, you're not going to be hired next day. So you start looking for a job. Let's say it takes you 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. Then during these 3 months, you are under frictional unemployment category. So you are in the labor force because you are not a student. You have already received your diploma. So you are not a student. You are in the labor force. You are looking for a job, and if you get 1 to 3 months to find a new job, your very first job, that unemployment is called frictional unemployment, and you cannot eliminate frictional unemployment from any country. The second type of unemployment is called structural unemployment. So structural unemployment results from a mismatch in the skills or location between jobs available and the people looking for work. This is basically called long-term frictional unemployment. So suppose if you just resign or are fired from one job, and if you want to find another job and that job requires you to acquire new skills, for example, so there's a mismatch of skills, and so you go to school and get a new skill, let's say in 2 semesters, 8 months or 6 months, and then you are hired for another job. That is called structural unemployment, because you become unemployed because of the changes in the structure of the society, and therefore you have to get retraining. For example, because of automation. So suppose if you have more mechanized agriculture sector, now workers will be unemployed, farmers basically, and they need to now learn how to operate a tractor in order to get employment. So first they go and get that training and then come back. So those 20, 30 years ago, uh, typist position, or those who were using typewriters, now we don't need typewriters or typists anymore. So therefore, if they want to get hired again, they need to get more education pertaining to that specific field. I'll give you more examples. Cyclical unemployment is the third type of unemployment, occurs as a result of the recessionary phase of the business cycle. So if in the country you have recession and you lost your job, for example, uh, you know, we had in 2008, and we, so in recessions, all businesses are actually laying off their workers, right? So they are firing their workers because there's no demand. People are not buying those goods and services. They have to reduce their uh, workforce. And you know this type of unemployment, because you are not leaving that job because you are going to get another job. You are not losing your job because of a mismatch in skills, because your skills are not required anymore in that business, and that is the reason you get unemployed. So therefore you have to get new skills or learn new skills. That is not the case. You are simply fired or you lost job because of the economic conditions. There's no demand for the product because of the recession. People are not earning, and therefore they are not demanding. So businesses have to lower their level of production by reducing their workforce. So this type of unemployment is called cyclical unemployment, that is related to the business cycle. So when there's a recession, you have high unemployment rate, cyclical unemployment, and when there's an expansion in the economy, the unemployment rate will decrease. That is, cyclical unemployment rate will decrease. Businesses will hire more workers. So this unemployment is related to business cycle. We'll discuss business cycle later. The fourth category is called discouraged workers. So discouraged workers are those who want to work but are not seeking it, believing that no opportunities exist. For example, full-time students. So what happens sometimes that I am in the labor force for the first 6 months, suppose, and I start searching jobs, and I couldn't able to find a job. So I just changed my status. I said, okay, I'm not looking for any job anymore. I'm going back to school and get more training so that I can get another job. So now actually I changed my status from labor force category to not in labor force category. So technically, I am unemployed as well, because initially I was looking for a job. When I couldn't find a job, I just changed my status from labor force to not in labor force category. So these workers are also is a type of unemployment. These workers are called discouraged workers. So some discouraged workers, they may come back to the labor force category if they see the economy is booming and there's more employment opportunities. So they quickly come to labor force and start working, start searching for new jobs as well. So these are four categories of unemployment. So I will also attach an article that talks about the changes in unemployment and employment before COVID, during COVID, and after uh, COVID, and see whether we have now employment and unemployment rate at the same pre-pandemic level or not. Because of COVID-19, we had high unemployment rate. Okay. So, this is what I see. And if you know more, you can Google it, and then you can also share your thoughts with me as well. Because I think COVID-19 pandemic, we have a higher unemployment uh, because of, I believe, cyclical unemployment, right? So this is not frictional unemployment, and this is not structural unemployment. This is for the whole society, and we were in the basically a recessionary phase. So people are, losing their jobs, not because of the differences, mismatching skills, or because you are looking for a better option, but simply, there's no demand because of COVID, because of that pandemic. So these are a few examples that I have just um, gathered by Googling. Okay, so but I have not given you which is you have to figure it out that whether this is an example of frictional unemployment, uh, structural unemployment, or cyclical unemployment. Sometimes it is pretty confusing as well. Sometimes one category may fall in both categories. Sometimes difficult. But anyways, so I'm just giving you all these examples, and probably in a day or two, I will, maybe next week, not next week, next Saturday, I will share the solution as well, tentative solution. If you disagree, just we can discuss. Number one, graduates might take some time to find their first job after receiving their certificates. Workers moving from one location to another, for example, international migration. For example, one immigrant was working earlier in, let's say, in India, and he or she moved to Canada, or immigrated to Canada. So when he landed or she landed here, he or she is not going to get employment right away. It takes some time, right? So that period of unemployment is called what? Frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, or cyclical unemployment. Workers switch between jobs for a higher salary or better position. Change from one profession to another if possible. Geologists versus data analysis. I have seen in Calgary, basically in whole Alberta, that geologists, when they were unable to find jobs in oil sector because of the lower price of oil in the international market, they all go to SAID, NAID, and other institutions to get data science certification so that they can work as data analyst. So what type of unemployment you think it should be? Then seasonal workers. So seasonal workers, they work during that season, but they become unemployed if they see, if I don't know how to say. So they are working in one specific. For example, construction workers are working in summer, but they're not working in winter. So what type of unemployment this would be? Workers move from the not in the labor force category to the labor force category. For example, retired people entering the labor force. So what do you think? This is what type of unemployment? Automation. So when agriculture is mechanized, some farmers will lose their jobs. Outsourcing. Several IT-related employment are now transferred. I don't know, sir. Okay, hold on. Just give me 1 sec. Okay. There's one problem with my screen, so let me fix it. Okay. Yes. So and also low skilled jobs as well. For example, in the United States, low skilled workers are always shouting for this outsourcing because they are losing job. If you transfer these jobs to, for example, Mexico, because you can hire workers there at lower. You can access low cost worker in Mexico. Uh, Employer discrimination against certain workers based on gender or ethnicity. So I just need your opinion. What do you think? If you are not hired because of this discrimination, what do call yourself? Being frictionally unemployed, structurally unemployed, or cyclically unemployed? And that is very difficult to decide. Some people may not agree. Government support, for example, government gives subsidies to specific industries or programs, and that will increase employment or decrease or increase unemployment. Seasonal workers. So I once again put seasonal worker here again. Unemployment is caused by recession or war sometimes. For example, you have huge unemployment nowadays in Ukraine. So what do you call that unemployment? A cyclical unemployment, frictional unemployment, or structural unemployment? And this is simply because of low aggregate demand. People are not demanding goods and services if the war is going on and if there's a recession in the country. So these are some of the examples of all these three categories, or four, I would say. So we already talked about frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, and cyclical unemployment. So we think, or the government also thinks, that frictional and structural unemployment cannot be removed altogether. It's not possible. So you will always have new technology. You have always advancement in new technology, and that would, of course, lead to some unemployment. And therefore, those unemployed workers, they need to get retraining. You will always find some frictional employment. People are moving from one job to another job, from one industry to another industry. Sometimes they relocate as well. Sometimes they move from one city to another city. So you cannot basically control frictional and structural unemployment. So we call this frictional and structural unemployment as natural rate of unemployment. You can't really do anything about it. So you will have to accept these two types of unemployment. This is what we call natural rate of unemployment. And in Canada, we basically estimate that it should be around 5 to 7%. So you will always have 5 to 7% unemployment in the country. You can't really get unemployment rate equal to zero. It's not possible. You will always find people moving from one job to another, from one area to another area. There's immigration as well. Similarly, there are few structural unemployment as well. So you can't really make them equal to zero, make these two unemployment equal to zero. And therefore, 5 to 7 will always be there. And this is what we call natural rate of unemployment. Now, if cyclical unemployment is zero, which is possible, why? Because if there's no recession in the country, if the country is on the expansionary phase of the business cycle, if the economy is expanding, employment level is increasing, it means there's no cyclical unemployment. So if there's no cyclical unemployment, we say that the economy is operating at full employment. So this is the meaning of full employment. By full employment, I don't mean that unemployment rate equal to zero. By full employment, I mean when cyclical unemployment equal to zero. In other words, full employment means when actual unemployment rate is exactly equal to natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so this is the meaning of full employment. Full employment, there are two ways to explain or define full employment. By full employment, and this is what I'm basically doing right now, positive macroeconomics. I'm not saying that it should be. This is just the data you can check. So full employment means, number one, either cyclical unemployment equal to zero. That is number one. Number two, full employment means when the actual unemployment rate is between 5 to 7%. So for example, if I say that in Canada, the unemployment rate currently, unemployment, actual, including everything, is 5.5%. It means we are very close to, or at least at full employment level, because 5.5 is natural rate of unemployment. Okay, but there's a debate whether natural rate of unemployment is 5 to 7%, more or less. But this is the acceptable figure, at least for Canadian economy. Now, the natural rate of unemployment, that is this 5 to 7%, can also can be changed as a result of. So the natural rate, that is frictional and structural unemployment, can increase or decrease because of these three factors. Number one, employment insurance benefit changes. So, for example, if you have EI benefits, if you have more EI benefits, if you know that if you are fired and lose your job, then you can apply for EI benefits, and these benefits are pretty lucrative. If this is the case, then frictional unemployment will increase because people and workers will tend to linger the matter on. They just delay getting another employment. Why? Because they're already getting very lucrative EI benefits. So why to worry and find another job? So that will increase the waiting period for rehiring. It means that you have higher rate of frictional unemployment. Average job search time changes. So if government provides more facilities to find jobs, for example, you go to the government offices, they'll provide you internet, they'll provide you all those resources, provide you material where you can apply, where you can find these jobs. That will reduce the job search time. And if this is the case, frictional unemployment will be lower. If you don't have these facilities, search time will increase, and therefore more frictional unemployment. Labor force, particularly female participation rate changes. So if there are more females are entering into labor force, then of course your frictional unemployment will increase because these workers will also be looking for jobs. So therefore, you have more natural rate of unemployment because you have more in labor force, more people in the labor force. So, in societies where females are not allowed or are discouraged to work, in those economies, the labor force is much smaller. And if labor force is much smaller, then there's less people who are changing jobs because only men or male are only working. But if female participation rate increases, it means you have a large labor size or labor force pool. And therefore, more people, both male and female, are looking for jobs. So frictional and structural unemployment will be higher in those economies, in those countries. Now, this is your job to go and go to Statistics Canada website and just check what is the unemployment rate in Canada. Okay, so when you go to the Statistics Canada website, it's statcan.ca.gc. You will see, you can easily find that information. So suppose if the unemployment rate is 5.5%, let's say. Does this mean that this 5.5 is equal to natural rate of unemployment and the economy is operating at full employment? There are certain criticisms of this official unemployment rate. So sometimes they are underestimated or understated or overstated. So these are all these four criticisms. Number one, the reported unemployment rate, that is 5.5%, may be understated. So actually, this unemployment rate is higher than 5.5. We're just underestimating this figure. Why? Because part-timers are included as full-timers. Because, we don't include those who are working on part-time basis as unemployed. Technically, they are at least 50% unemployed as well. But this is the definition of employment, that those who are working part-time, they are considered employed. This number, that is 5.5%, is also understated because it excludes discouraged workers, those who want to work, those who want work but are not seeking it, believing that no opportunity exists. So discouraged workers, those, some people, if you interview them in the universities at those who are studying full time, if you ask them why you are not working, some of them might say that they could not able to find employment, and that is the reason they come back to school and do their complete their another degree or update their knowledge, whatever, right? So they are technically unemployed, but we don't count them as unemployed because they are not stopped searching for jobs. Now, this reported unemployment rate may be overstated as well because of false information from some EI recipients. So some people, workers, they are receiving EI benefits and they are also working, but they are not showing that they are working. So maybe they are working on cash. So some people are working on cash. So from official point of view, they're unemployed, and therefore they're included in 5.5% rate, unemployment rate, but technically they're working. So that is overstated. So your 5.5 rate may be 5% only, because these 0.5% people are actually working, but they are not showing that they are working because they are earning or receiving EI benefits. Is also overstated. It is also overstated because of false information from those working in the underground economy. So some people are working in underground economy, both legal and illegal, and because these EI recipients, they are working on cash basis, on cash. So they are working, in legal activities. If they are working in any shop, I don't want to name any shop. If they are working legal job, right? It's not illegal. They're not selling, marijuana, or they are not involved in smuggling, but they are legal. This is legal, but they are underground technically. So underground basically include both legal and illegal. So these activities are basically what I'm trying to say. Don't worry about legal or illegal or underground terms. What I'm saying that this 5.5% is overstated simply because some unemployed workers, which we think are unemployed, they are actually working but are not reporting their work, simply, for whatever reasons. Now, what is the cost of unemployment? Why we are calculating unemployment rate? Why we are so much interested in unemployment rate? What is the point of calculating this unemployment rate? So we want to understand that if you have huge unemployment rate, it imposes cost to the society. What is the cost? There is one way to calculate this cost in terms of dollars. So in order to calculate the cost of unemployment, first we need to understand what do we mean by GDP gap. What is GDP gap? So GDP gap is the difference between potential GDP and actual GDP. So these are two types of GDP: potential GDP, actual GDP. Potential GDP means GDP when you have full employment. And by full employment, I don't mean unemployment rate equal to zero. Unemployment rate equal to natural rate of unemployment, that is frictional and structural, or cyclical unemployment equals zero. So this is potential GDP. And actual GDP, that is what is the actual GDP simply. And we have already discussed how to calculate GDP for the Canadian economy, okay, in previous sessions. So GDP gap is potential GDP minus actual GDP. How we are going to calculate this potential GDP? We know how to calculate actual GDP. So if we know actual GDP and if we know somehow GDP gap, then we can easily calculate potential GDP. Let me give you a small number. Suppose if I say GDP gap is 100, and I'll tell you we can calculate this GDP gap using Okun's law, and I'll tell you. So suppose I know if the gap between potential GDP and actual GDP is $100, and if I know that my actual GDP is $70 right now, I can easily calculate potential GDP. So potential GDP must be $170, because if I subtract 170 from $170, I get $100. Okay. So I know that full employment GDP should be 170, and I'm only the country's actual GDP is only 70 because of unemployment. So the cost of unemployment is technically $100 billion or $1 trillion. No, $100 billion. 1,000 billion is 1 trillion. Okay. Now, why not first discuss Okun's law, and then I'll give you a simple example and calculate these numbers. So that will clarify everything. So this is Okun's law. What is Okun's law? For every 1% of cyclical unemployment, so whenever you have unemployment in the country, I told you the natural rate of unemployment will always be there. You don't need to worry about. Government should not worry about natural rate of unemployment, that is frictional and structural unemployment. If we have 1% of cyclical unemployment in the country, so suppose if cyclical unemployment rate is 1%, and economy's GDP is 2.5% below its potential. This is the rule. So now I can easily calculate GDP gap. How? This is how I calculate. So it says for every 1% of cyclical unemployment, and economy's GDP is 2.5% below its potential GDP. Although it's not written here, but it's potential GDP. What does this mean? It means the GDP gap, that is the difference between potential GDP and actual GDP, is 2.5, which is this, times cyclical unemployment multiplied by actual GDP. This is how we calculate GDP gap. Even if you don't understand this formula, don't worry about it. Why not let's take one simple example and solve. So that will help you understand what I'm trying to explain here. Let's take this example. Given a natural rate of unemployment of 8%, remember, this is natural rate, not full employment rate, natural rate. Natural rate means frictional and structural unemployment is given as 8%. And actual rate of unemployment is 10%. So I know that actual means overall unemployment, including both all these three types of unemployment: frictional, structural, and cyclical. So I know frictional and structural is 8%, and I know all three are 10%. So I know what is cyclical unemployment. So I'm writing cyclical unemployment equal to 2%. How do I know 2%? 10 minus 8, 2%. Now I use this formula. GDP gap equals, always write 2.5, always, then cyclical unemployment, and I intentionally write percent. So you have to write in percent. So if it says 2, so just write 0.02. Okay. So that is why I did not write 2. I write 2%. That is 0.02 actually. And then times GDP. Suppose actual GDP is given, it should be given here. Oh yeah, 800 billion. So actual GDP is 800 billion. So this is how you do 2.5 times 800 first, and then calculate the 2% of that number. That is multiplied by 0.02. So you will get 40 billion. So I know that gap, because of 1% or 2%, because of 2% cyclical unemployment, the gap is 40 billion. And I know that actual is 800. So it means if we do not have any unemployment, cyclical unemployment, that is, if we were operating at full employment, the GDP at full employment would be 840 billion. How do I know 840? Because 800 is this and 40 billion is this. So 40 billion is actually the cost of this just 2% unemployment. So if you have 2% cyclical unemployment, and if your actual GDP is $800 billion, it means you are paying a cost of $40 billion because of that 2% cyclical unemployment in the country. So this 840 I've calculated here. So potential GDP is actual GDP plus GDP gap, 80, 40 billion, 800 plus 40, 840 billion. Okay. 80, 40 billion, 800 plus 40, 840 billion. Okay. Now, so that's all as far as part one of chapter number. Oh, basically, I just completed unemployment topic, right? And now, so I will stop here, and in the next session, I will complete the next topic, that is inflation. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.